Elizabeth, it's great to be here with you again on History Abode, and this time we're going to be exploring the history of many of our buildings, both past and present, including the history of Agricultural Hall as well as Town Hall.
That's right, Joe, and we have Martha Bewick here with us today, and she is absolutely an expert, so this should be really interesting. So there are buildings that were less fortunate than Town Hall, for example, Agricultural Hall, that was demolished somewhere around 1965.
You know, Elizabeth, we're really fortunate to have our special guest today to tell us about the history of Agricultural Hall. And let's introduce Martha Bewick.
Well, thanks so much. And I've had to do a little research, and I also talked with our august town historian, Alec McMillan, who's currently on the lake in New Hampshire, but sent his greetings. The story is that about the middle of the 1800s, a number of Hingham's residents who had done very well in their businesses decided to look into farming and to improvements in farming, and decided to create an agricultural and horticultural society. And with that, they decided to build a building. And actually, it was located here, where the library now is located. The way that the building was arranged was included the following. The ground floor was a restaurant or kitchen. The second floor, or the main floor, was for exhibitions. And then the top floor could accommodate 600 people for dinner. And among the people who were very enthusiastic members was Albert Fearing, who lived in what's now the St. Paul's Rectory, and who, by coincidence, was a great philanthropist and contributed some $30,000 to the Hingham Library at that time. But he was president of the society for about 17 years. So that was the beginning of the society.
You wonder what the hall would be like today had it not been removed.
Well, I did a little bit of looking back into that as well. And the story was that over the years, the reasons for the organization faded away and the purposes vanished. And so the hall was used for other purposes, for town meetings, for general meetings of different organizations. But by about that time, the hall had become an abandoned albatross, so it was not being used. And so it was more of an eyesore and probably a fire hazard. And also what had happened by that time is that the high school was being built, and there was then going to be an auditorium for town meetings as well as a gymnasium. And then what also happened is that at the time that the town's library was outgrowing its size, and the town hall, the original town hall, which was also becoming too small, it was decided by town that they should take the property where the old abandoned, now albatross, as Alec called it, was located, and have that become both the center for the new library and then the new town hall. And so that's the building that we have right here today. I did want to mention also that a bit about horticulture in the town, if that's appropriate at this point. Even though the Horticultural and Agricultural Society, which went on for years with great exhibitions and competitions about how deep should you plant your Indian corn, people had won prizes for how much fertilizer is good for a quarter acre of land. So these were the experiments that people were working with in those days. But in 1924, the Garden Club was formed, the Garden Club of Hingham. And it's so interesting looking through the history there. That'll be about 100 years that the Garden Club will be alive and going and active. That'll be in 2024. But even in early days, there were meetings, discussions about horticulture. I read that in the 30s, people would grow produce in their gardens and put it on the train to Boston to help people who were less fortunate. And over the years, there have been horticultural specialists in the club. There are regular monthly meetings where we learn about aspects of horticulture or flower arranging or garden practices. But what's interesting this year is that there's a new program called Plant a Row, where about a dozen members are planting an extra row in the garden, and the produce of which will go to the food bank. So that makes a bit of a full circle to that in the 1930s. So generally, people think of the Garden Club as a group that works planting medians and providing wreaths, something that we have been working on for 70 years. But it's more than that. It's also dealing with produce and plenty.
That's excellent.
Yes.
You can't help but think that the functions of the Garden Club today are filling the void that was previously filled by the Agricultural Hall in terms of its functions for the community.
That's a good point. I think it was very different then, in that there was sort of a scientific approach to gardening and competitions and what have you for these gentleman farmers, so to speak. And you look back on the figures, it was like Albert Fearing or Wilman Blackmar, the Civil War patriot who received a Medal of Honor here and was responsible for the Brewer Farm down on World's End, or Samuel Downer and his son, who were working on creating cherries and new kinds of fruit. I mean, it was a different kind of focus then. Now the Garden Club deals a lot with decorative flowers, but food as well, and step up when there are various needs. I mean, and also participate in Arbor Day, planting trees around the town. We do have a whole tree committee in town, which is dealing with the tree culture. So there are groups around town that fill in pieces of what might have been 100 years ago.
Martha, thank you for visiting with us today. I've learned so much about the history of Agricultural Hall.
In fact, we're heading over to Town Hall. Is there anybody that you can think of that could help us with the history of Town Hall?
Oh, absolutely. There's no one better to talk to than Tom Carey. He's an attorney based in Boston, a wonderful benefactor to the town in many ways, but one of his major contributions was overseeing the entire restoration of what was then the school to what's Town Hall today. So give him a call. He would be wonderful.
Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you. We are here at Hingham Town Hall, which was built in 1928 and originally used as the high school. In later years, it became the middle school, and then after that, it was slated for demolition.
You know, that's right, Elizabeth. Had it not been for the efforts of local citizens, this building would have been long gone. Tom Carey is especially responsible for saving this building, and it now serves many uses. That of a senior center, our police headquarters, and our recreational department. We're very fortunate to have Tom with us today. Hello, Tom. Can you give us an overview of the events that led to saving this reliable building?
Sure. In the early 90s, as some people may recall, there were a lot of financial difficulties, a lot of expenses, a lot going on, including the fact that a recent survey of all the town buildings had demonstrated complete inadequacies in many of them. For example, the senior center had 350 square feet at Hersey House on the first floor. They basically had a one-room meeting room. The police station down on 3A was woefully inadequate, and other buildings were suffering. Many people were proposing additions to these single-use buildings. At the same time, due to the failure of an override, the school department had declared this 90,000 square foot building surplus to school needs and consolidated it into a single middle school, leaving the town with the problem of what do we do with this white elephant? Over several years and several studies, various proposals were made. The entire 3-story building added in 1967 should be the police station, bigger than the FBI. And the rest of this should all be rec department. Then there was a proposal which passed town meeting to put the I think police over there and housing, convert this for low-income housing. It passed, a special town meeting was called, it was repealed. So it had reached the point where there were actually proposals to knock the building down and sell it off for house lots and help the treasury that way. And the selectmen asked me, or I suggested to them, I have a sense that there's more that can be done here that hasn't been explored. Would you like me to give it a try? And they did. In town meeting, they appointed me to chair a committee with wonderful people on it and supportive advisory and selectmen. We did a year-long study, not limited to this building, but the overall picture, and came up with the thought that there is enough space here to move the police department in, sell that building off to offset costs, to move the school department in, sell the school department building to alleviate costs. The town office building, which had been constructed at the same time as the town library, after Agricultural Hall was knocked down and the site was used for that purpose, was totally inadequate. And so by combining all of those, we came up with the notion of a civic center, a name that was a complete dud. All the campaign was about a civic center. Everyone just calls it Town Hall. And from that, and years of work and committees, we got approval in '94 from town meeting to go forward with the project. Spent a couple of years putting all of the numbers together. The numbers came in $2 million more than our original estimate. Had to go back to town meeting for an additional $2 million. We won an override. We had a 90% vote on the floor of town meeting, 76%. Clearly, the town thought this was a municipal building and ought to be used for those purposes. Ultimately, they gave us the additional money. We built it. I chaired, my reward for all the planning was to chair the building committee, big ideas, see if you can actually do this, because if it's over budget, again, there's only one person who's going to be responsible. But with the help of so many other people, we completed it. And on October 17th, 1998, we dedicated the new town hall as you see it now.
Was it difficult to persuade the citizens to save the building?
No, actually, I think the citizens were more interested in saving it from the beginning than some of the people studying the issue. There was a widespread view, including that of a local architect who had been the chair of the Historic Districts Committee for 25 years in town, that this building was built as a municipal building. It looked that way, and that's what it ought to be preserved as. This was a way to do it and expand it so that it's truly a municipal building in multiple respects. And it was met with great acceptance from the town. At the time, people were coming from towns all over the South Shore to look at our 5,000 square foot senior center with its own little fireplace that I had to fight the bean counters tooth and nail at the end to keep the fireplace. Now it's inadequate, and we're presently studying how to expand that. The police department, which was good size, ultimately they outgrew it, and now we're back looking at a combined fire and police facility on 3A. The irony is that when we did this, it had been about a quarter of a century, and there had been nothing done for town stuff since. And here we are, roughly a quarter of a century later, and we're revisiting it because though I thought we planned for plenty of space, we've run out, the needs have changed, and so we're redoing it once more.
What would you tell future generations in regard to saving historic buildings?
This town has a long history of historic preservation. To a fault, some people would say. I'm not one of the people who feels that way. I think we have managed to preserve much of the essence of the community, while at the same time accommodating growth and modern reuses. I think the town hall, as it presently stands, is an indicator of that. If you pay attention and you manage well, you can preserve this historic authenticity of the town for everyone's enjoyment, and at the same time deliver the modern services that people require.
That's some pretty sound advice, Tom. We really appreciate your taking the time with us today.
Happy to, and I hope everyone's going to vote for the improved senior center when the time comes. I don't want to lose a winning record this late along the way.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
You know, Elizabeth, it's been a real treat visiting this building, listening to Tom Carey and the efforts of other local citizens to save this building.
It has, Joe. In fact, interestingly enough, when they saved the building, Massachusetts Historic Society granted an award to the town. So it was really worth it. And obviously we have it today, so it's been great fun.
Well, our hope is future generations will appreciate that effort and hopefully continue to preserve this building.
Hopefully.